Welcome back, everyone. In this video, I want to address the topic of social media. So I got an email, and this is actually from somebody that I've known for a number of years. I haven't talked to in a while. Sent me an email out of the blue, and I did respond to this individual, but I thought this would be something actually to bring up in a video and open it up as a conversation with you guys. So let me read you what he wrote. It says, "Dear Ted, love your show. I have a question about promoting my work. How do you get followers and traction on Instagram? I've been working at playing to the algorithm for a whole year now using hashtags, etc., and it seems I can't grow at all. Do you have any advice for someone who's literally posted hundreds of images and can't seem to gain any ground?" So that is the million-dollar question that I get asked very often, and so I wanted to address it in a video because I think people do not look at social media or Instagram the right way sometimes, and I just want to be very realist about all this. So Instagram is a very popular medium for photographers, videographers, because it is a visual medium. It is a visual social media where you can post your work and you can build an audience of people to look at it. So how is that so hard to do these days? First off, you have to realize that Instagram has been around for a while, and Instagram today is not the same that it was in 2012. So 8-9 years ago, I don't remember what year Facebook actually acquired it, but it has grown substantially and it is very saturated now. And let's be honest, Instagram want you to pay for advertising for visibility because they're owned by Facebook and they do the same thing. It doesn't mean you can't build a following. It just means you need to be realistic about how saturated things are on Instagram today. The other thing that bothers me, and I hear this actually a lot, and it's in this message too, it says, "I've been working on playing to the algorithm for a year now with hashtags." So guys, algorithms are something we need to talk about. So algorithm is a generic term that people like to throw around describing the engine or the software that recommends content on any given platform, be that YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is. An algorithm probably is more than just one formula. It's probably multiple algorithms that do different things to suggest content. They may even work together. And the hardest thing about understanding algorithms today is most of these companies, I guarantee you, are on the cutting edge of deep learning, AI, and they're engineered in a way where the computers all handle it. And so the engineers basically say, this is the result we want, and then the algorithm will develop itself and experiment with things to try to get better at achieving that goal. I know this is kind of engineer speak, but that's what it does. My point is, don't worry about the algorithms. You're never going to crack it, and I guarantee you most people who even have jobs at these platforms, people who work at Instagram, don't understand exactly how the algorithm works, so they couldn't tell you how to crack it either. So the reason I say forget about the algorithm is let's look at the bigger picture. Why does an algorithm exist? Well, it's trying to do something in terms of curation that a human can't. There is an end goal that the algorithm is trying to achieve for the platform. So let's take Instagram, since that's what was asked about. What is the end goal commodity of Instagram? I would argue that it's people's time on the platform. In other words, the longer that you're on Instagram, the more often you go during the day, the more you're going to potentially be served an ad, which is how that company makes money. And that's fair. It's an expensive platform to run, and that's how they monetize it. And so what they're going to do is they're using these algorithms to look for content that is more engageable, I guess, for lack of a better word. So in other words, what do people want to see? What do they come back to see? How often do they engage with your content? How often do they spend, or how long do they spend looking at it? Are they actually leaving a comment? Are they hitting the like button? All those things go into that equation. So knowing that, rather than trying to crack the algorithm, if you look at the bigger picture and you realize where these companies are trying to go, it's a much smarter method to try to just deliver content that's going to be for the platform. So you're probably thinking, hey, Ted, that doesn't make any sense. My work speaks for itself. I shouldn't have to sell it like I would a product. I'm on Instagram. I should be able to have access to the audience and the people who followed me. Well, I agree with that, but it's actually arguable that it is not your audience. It belongs to the platform, and you have access to your audience that's really their audience, if that makes any sense. I know that sounds harsh, but that's just kind of how things work in the world. So for instance, look at something different, like let's say Netflix. Netflix is not a social media. They pay a lot of money to have their content produced, and you can't just get anything onto Netflix. That has to kind of go through their vetting, and it has to be something that they feel is going to be accessible, that people actually want to watch. And so I would urge you to look at your content the same same way. What is it that people want to see? Now, you don't have to do this if you feel your work speaks for itself, or maybe you're in a very specific niche that just is not going to have a big audience, and that's actually something to address too. The size of your audience is probably the most dangerous metric for any creator, myself included. We've all been through it. You're frustrated because it's not growing, or you see somebody else who's having an enormous amount of success, and then you start looking at it and like, well, I can do what they do. Why? How come they have this huge following that I do? And see, here's the thing. Your audience, your size, it's all irrelevant, because I've seen people that have had very much successful businesses with like an audience of like maybe a couple hundred people. And I'm here to tell you that, because I've been there, if you can't handle an audience of 100 or 200 people who follow your work, you're probably not ready for an audience that is going to be the size of like 1 million, let's say. Now, I don't have 1 million followers on Instagram, but my point is that if you're there for the followers, then what reason have you given anybody to want to see your work other than I want to be followed? There are, of course, people with egos that big who do make it work, but my point is that if you're asking yourself the question, why isn't this working? I think the first thing you need to look at is, am I delivering the kind of work that people want to look at? So as I go through this, think about people that you follow, that you look up to, that you enjoy the work of, and how they're producing what we're about to go through and talk about. So first thing, you definitely want to post great work. If you're a photographer, you want to put your best images up there. If you're into video, you want to put the best videos that you can make up there too. I mean, that's essentially what it is that we're going for. But my point is that if you're just doing that, now, it can be done, but it's going to be harder unless you're a National Geographic photographer or somebody who's already a big name and people are already identifying with that work. I think it becomes more difficult if you're not known, because why are people looking at these images and what makes them interesting? It's also important to consider not only the types of things that you can post, but the different ways that you can post on Instagram as a platform. So you have the feed, which is where you just post an image and you can write something about it, and you can post multiple images. You can have a little gallery of stuff in one post. You can mix that up. You can have video and still photos. Then there's different ways you can post. We've only talked about putting things in the feed. There's also Instagram stories. There's Reels. There's IGTV. These are all multiple places that you can actually push content out. And it's also multiple formats. And I would be willing to bet you that a lot of you are not actually taking advantage of not only the multiple content types, but the multiple places that you can be putting these things. So I just rattled off about 4 different ways that you can reach 4 different audiences potentially, and a different approach to how you're looking at putting your stuff out on Instagram. Another thing that I like to do when I plan content for something like Instagram is I don't look at it in terms of, oh, I should post a video today, or I should put a still image up. What I look at it in terms of is conceptually, what is it that I'm communicating? What kind of story am I telling here? And then what is most effective for doing that? A lot of times this happens just very spur of the moment. Other times it's very planned out, but I think that's a really important thing. See, because a lot of times photographers, we get very consumed with our own work because, like, let's be honest, that's what we're there to share. And so just posting your photographs are only telling a very small part of the story. There's another very important key element that you have to this, and that is your process. And this belongs on Instagram because I think this is what people relate to. They want to understand, they want to see how things are done. Some of the people that I follow that I really enjoy, that I think are the most successful at this, are, it's not so much that they're treating Instagram as an art gallery. In fact, they're not. They're not there just to say, oh, look at me, here's my wonderful work, but they're there to invite you in and show you what goes on behind the scenes and what that process is that goes into that. That's what's going to be a little more engaging, and I think it's going to actually build relationships with people because they get to know you. I've always said, think of social media as the virtual cocktail party. If you're going to go in there and stand against the wall and not introduce yourself to anybody, or not get involved, or not share personal details, then you can't expect to have a lot of friends walking away from the cocktail party, and it's really not that much different. It's just in a virtual world online. I realize that a lot of you are probably thinking of this and you're thinking, oh wow, I've got to film myself talking on camera. Now, some people are very comfortable with it. Obviously, that's what I'm doing right now. Some people are not, but there are still ways that you can communicate. You can show people what you're all about, and you can show process is what I'm talking about, documenting that behind the scenes. And then I also want to get into what I think is kind of the most important thing that ties all this together. But real quick, I want to give a shout out to our sponsor today, who actually are very fitting, because if you're looking at trying to find new ways of creating really cool stuff for social media, you need to check out the awesome folks over at Canva. Creating eye-catching content to stand out visually is a challenge in today's crowded world of social media, and this is where Canva comes in. Canva empowers the world to design and communicate through video, and it couldn't be easier to get inspired and make it part of the content that you post. Animated posts and videos always get more engagement. You don't have to spend a lot of time or be a professional editor or animator to get that professional look. Canva provides thousands of stunning templates created by content and marketing experts. You can animate static posts in one click and choose from Canva's library of beautiful stock images or even upload your own. Want to create moving stories? Canva is full of simple ways to create content designed to move your audience. So check out Canva using the link below this video and you can get free access to a full 45-day trial. Check them out and see what they can do for you and your content. And I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Canva for sponsoring this video. So when I'm talking about showing process, yeah, filming yourself talking is a great way of doing that, especially if you're going to get into like Instagram Live or doing live videos. Those take the pressure off considerably because you really don't have to have your thoughts as prepared. You're just engaging people in the moment. And that's kind of interesting. Now, I know that there are a lot of people that really are uncomfortable being on camera at all. Sometimes you can do it through your work. You could do it through still photographs. You could just have behind the scenes stuff. You can have, I like the idea of recurring themes. Some people call this characters, and a character could be like a person in real life, or a character could be like, I've just moved into this new studio, right? That's something that I do in all my videos. And so it's something I can kind of refer to along the way, and it gives people something to attach to that's not just a talking head talking about photography all day or reviewing a camera or whatever it is that I'm doing. It gives a little bit of a narrative that goes in with that. That can be done in still photographs just as easily as it can be done in video. You can do it without involving yourself necessarily. And so that's a really good technique to get a lot of this like going in terms of telling that narrative story. The most important thing tying all of this together is a concept called context. Context really is everything. So what is context, you might be asking? Let's say that I just gave you the punchline to a joke. Chances are it's not very funny if you didn't hear the beginning of the joke, and that's what context is. Context is what surrounds the idea that you're delivering and makes sense out of it. And this is something that's really important, and I had a great conversation with Ralph Gibson, who's a mentor of mine. I had a chance to study with him actually a couple months ago, and we were talking about creating personal projects, bodies of work, and let's just say for the sake of our discussion here, this is something that I'm putting work on Instagram. I'm talking about it. People kind of know what I'm working on. They can expect. And he said, context plays such an important role in all of this. He said, if you look at two of arguably the most famous photography books of all time, so Henri Cartier-Bresson's The Decisive Moment, and the other being Robert Frank's The Americans. Both of those are seminal books. Not just that, they're widely famous. People understand those books. So in the history of photography and all the books that have been published through the years, and we're talking a half a century or longer, there's been thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions. So why are those two books household names and the rest aren't? And it was interesting because Ralph said, well, notice he gave it a title. It's called The Americans. It's not just Ralph's 20 greatest hits. And I think the same holds true for Henri Cartier-Bresson. Now, Robert Frank actually did have that was the title of that project, and it was his view of traveling through America during the mid-century. I think Henri Cartier-Bresson was absolutely brilliant in the way he did his. There was less cohesive of a collection. He was a photojournalist, so it was a lot of his greatest hits, but it was not called Henri Cartier-Bresson's greatest hits. It was called The Decisive Moment, and I love that. And so a lot of these things, I know that I've kind of gone a little conceptual here, but I think the mistake that people make is when they look at Instagram in terms of, I want to just be famous, I want to get followers, I want to have that response to my work. Now, we all have, you look at the hierarchy of needs, there is a need for reception or response to the work that you're doing, and that's actually normal. Nobody likes to talk about it, but it is normal. But you want to be getting that out of social media. But I just think that most people go in it with the wrong mindset. They're going in of what can this do for me? In fact, I think in many cases there's an expectation of this should be doing something for me. And they're not looking at it in terms of how am I communicating with the audience that I have built. And I don't care if that audience is 4 people. It probably isn't 4. I mean, you've got friends and stuff that you probably communicate with on Instagram, and I think the platform's a little nicer than that. But my point is that a small audience or a large audience, that number doesn't matter. What you're saying and what you're doing does. And so I think that if you can follow that and you can create something that people want to see and you've given them a reason to follow the content that you're making, I think you're going to find success. I'd love to know what you guys think, so drop me a comment below. I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.